Son of David, have pity on me. We know very little about Bartimaeus, apart from the fact that he was blind and he was a beggar. Most in that era, if they didn't have a family to take care of them or someone to take care of them, if they had a condition, if you call it that, such as blindness or lameness, they could do nothing but beg in order to stay alive. But by some way, be it by providence or by his own actions, Bartimaeus managed to have him put himself or be in a place where Jesus was passing. There wasn't a lot of hope for the lame and the blind in the day of Christ, hope of moving forward, getting a better life. All they could hope for was get enough food and money for the day. And yet it is fairly clear that Bartimaeus had heard of Christ. He had heard of the things that he had done, and in him he had hope, real hope. He completely believed that this man could save him, could heal him. Now, as he was sitting at the side of the road, he heard, because that's all he could do, that Jesus was passing by. Now, you can imagine if you can't see, you hear that Christ is passing by, you don't know whether he is close or whether he is far. So as the gospel tells us, he started to shout to make sure that Christ heard him. He started to shout, "Son of David, Jesus, have pity on me." And many, you can imagine when we're in a crowd, if you've ever been in a crowded situation and someone starts to speak a little loudly, or you think they're a bit out of line, many said, "Be quiet, shut up, what are you doing?" He didn't pay any attention to them. It says here, he shouted all the louder, "Son of David, have pity on me." You can imagine, this was his only hope. There was no other way out of this darkness that he was experiencing except through this man of whom he had heard. And so he screamed, he yelled, he shouted to get his attention. And Jesus stopped. He heard him. Of course, Jesus already knew he was there. But he heard him, and he asked others to go and grab him. And so they did. They told him to have courage. Do not be afraid. He's calling you. You can imagine the sense of joy, expectation, somewhat relief to hear that Christ had heard him. He'd heard him shouting. It took a lot of effort. Maybe it took him effort to get there. We don't know if he got there by his own design or by providence. But by shouting and putting up with the abuse of others, and he had been heard. And then Jesus asked him, "What is it you want? Why are you calling my name?" His name is not just any name, Son of David, Jesus. He was acknowledging him as someone more than just a rabbi. Son of David, sign that he understood it. He came from the lineage of David, therefore he was royal in his blood, and very likely the Messiah, the anointed one. And so Jesus asked, "What do you want from me? Why are you calling me?" He puts it very clearly because this is all he's been thinking about, I'm sure. He doesn't have to think about it anymore. He just says it, "Rabboni, Master, Teacher, let me see again." We know at one stage, therefore, that this man has a problem, very likely was not born blind if he wants to see again. He had seen before, and something happened, and he lost his sight. And he wanted nothing more to get it back. He couldn't do it alone, though, so he went to him who could. "Master, let me see again." Christ willed it, and it happened. And he says, "Your faith has saved you." His sight returned, and he followed him along the road. Blindness, therefore, is something that Christ can cure, and unfortunately it's something that the vast majority of us suffer from. not in that physical sense of blindness. That is a much lesser evil. That's what they just call a physical evil. It's not offensive to God. Rather, we have that spiritual blindness, not being able to see God. Often it's because of our own sins that we can't see God. We are blinded by things. We put things between us and God, and we cannot see. So sometimes we can remove those obstacles ourselves. Sometimes we can turn the light on, so to speak, so that we can see. But other times we are ignorant of what it is. Or we just don't know what it is we can do to see Christ better, to follow him more closely. And so we need to repeat with Bartimaeus, Son of David, Jesus, have pity on me, Master, that I may see again. Well, I may see for the first time, maybe. But with this prayer there must be these two other things of faith that this man had. He had been longing for it for a long time, hence he was longing for it. He wanted to see again, and he knew that this was the way. And sometimes, for our own good, for us to grow in faith, there was a certain cross on our shoulders that Christ leaves for our own good. Our faith builds up, and when it is at the stage where it needs to be, for our own good and for God's glory, he takes it away. But there's something else we must do as well as we build up our faith. We look at this line here. Just after they called Bartimaeus, they said, courage. They said, get up, he is calling you. And what does he do? He throws off his cloak, jumped up and went to Jesus. He didn't grab all his stuff and go to Jesus. You know, beggars, for those who have ever worked with the poor on the streets, they are often very possessive of the little that they possess. Hence we have those terms like bag ladies and trolley people. If you've ever seen them around the place, all they have is there and they keep it with them at all times. This man let it all go. He threw off his cloak and went after Christ. There must be nothing between us and God. There must be nothing that we hold on so tightly that it becomes an obstacle. Everything, we must be willing to give up whatever it is that God asks us in order to follow him. Now, he often doesn't ask much of us. He often just asks us to give up those things which we already should be giving up, the sinful things, the things that are not good for us or good for our relationship with God. You know, on the rare occasion, not that rare, he asks us to give up a little more. For example, the friars who try to follow the evangelical counsels, who profess the evangelical counsels of poverty, chastity, and obedience. But what we all must be willing to do is to give up whatever it is. These cloaks can often weigh us down. And they're often not just over our shoulders, but over our eyes as well. We see as soon as Bartimaeus could see, the first thing he did, and he continued to do, was follow Christ along the road. He had longed to know him so that he might follow him. Now that he can see him, he would follow him, and he would let nothing hold him back. Christ warns us another part of the gospel too, to not look back. To not look back behind us of what we've left behind and count the cost. Because when we start doing that, that's when we start to go back also. And it happens. It happens. It may have happened to many of us here. Christ is all merciful, of course, and he'll always call us back. But let us not lose ground. Let us not be afraid of whatever it is that God asks from us. And normally these things are little. It's normally not even worldly possessions that he asks us to give up, although at times that is also the case. But it's often our own self-righteousness, our own opinions at times, or our presumed right to voice those opinions, our little grudges that we hold, or big grudges, basically a lack of love for one another, our own selfishness. These are the things, these are the cloaks that bind us, that weigh us down, and that blind us. And as long as we hold on to these things, and no matter how much we say, Lord, that I may see, the first thing he will allow us to see is that we need to get rid of these things out of our lives, these obstacles, these proverbial cloaks that are weighing us down. For each one of us, there is nothing that Christ wants more than for us to see, so that we may follow. There's nothing more he wants for us than for us to be free, so that we may walk unhindered, without the chains of these things which hold us back. It is possible to do so. It may take a great deal of courage. They said to Bartimaeus, courage. You can imagine, even if you meet someone famous or someone you admire, especially with young people, they may be scared or afraid to go up. Even more so with Christ. This moment has passed that this guy's longed for. Now he needs courage to actually take the step. I remember even with following a vocation. I was part of a vocations group before I was a friar. We talked about vocations all the time and this and that and the other. But for someone to actually take the step into the religious life was something altogether different. It takes a great deal of courage which comes from above. And so we need to have that courage also, to shed the scales from our eyes, to allow our Lord to let us see who we are and who God is. That great prayer of St. Francis, Lord, who are you and who am I? And when we start to see properly, then we will be able to shed these things and follow him. In order, though, to ask him this, therefore, we need to place ourselves where he is passing by. Obviously, primarily, he is always here in the tabernacle. He is always here passing by. He wishes that when we pass by, we might acknowledge that and ask him that we may see. When we place ourselves in prayer, it is there that we will find him passing by. And we ask him that we may see. And if we're not sure how we can even get to church or how we can delve into prayer, then we go to his mother. Like every good mother, she always knows where her son is. And she will take us in her arms if we cannot walk ourselves and take us to her son, so that we may ask, that we may indeed see again. Let us not be content with darkness. Let us not be satisfied with mediocrity, as St. John Paul II put it. Let us take courage, and let us have that confident courage that Christ loves us above, well, he loves us infinitely, as much as God can, which is an infinite way. That Christ wants light in our life, not darkness. That Christ wants us to be happy, to be peaceful. Christ wants to forgive us, and he wants us to forgive ourselves in recognition of what he has forgiven us also. This is the truth of who our God is. When we call on him, he will respond. He always hears, and he always has pity on us. Let our prayer therefore be, from this moment on, in union with Bartimaeus, Lord, have mercy on us, that we may see again. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.